Hey everyone, it's Christine. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to this series where we have Hayley back with us. And this time we are going to be diving deeper into another facet of healing. And it's not what you think. So stay tuned and join us to take a look at how a healer becomes a healer. Welcome back, Hayley. It's so good to have you here.
So good to be here, Christine. Thank you for having me back.
You're welcome. I've always enjoyed our chats. There's always more nuggets that are unearthed and a lot of learning that I experience and that I know folks that are watching and tuning in experience as well. And I want to say for anyone that's new here, please take a look at the first video that we did with Hayley on family constellations system. And you can find it here somewhere. I will link it. And it is an exhaustive deep dive into what family constellations is and will give you a better idea on how Hayley utilizes this modality and what you can do with it too and how you can work with her further. We also dive deeper into creating your reality, and I'll pop that second video here, which follows even more along this line of how you can use family constellations and also what Hayley has done in her own life to shift and to change and to get unstuck. So I'm excited for this episode, this video, where we are going to actually highlight Hayley. We are going to pull the covers off the bed, if you will, and we're going to go lurking, diving deep, and taking a look at Hayley's journey. You could call it her life story, and see how she came to be, what her life was like, how she was able to navigate difficulties, hardships, challenges, heal, more importantly, get into what she has been called to do with her psychic and psychic medium gifts, and more importantly, how she's utilized family systems in her journey and more, lots more. So I know I said a mouthful. There is so much to start or even delve into. And I want to ask you, Hayley, what first prompted you earlier in your life to realize, you know what, something's different about me or my family or my life in general?
Well, very definitely, it was the loss of my mom. I lost my mom when I was 6, and that definitely cast me onto the outside, made me feel very different from others. It's a very strange feeling, when teachers say, "Take this home to your mom," and you're like, "What mom?" My dad did remarry, and so I did have a stepmother in time, but definitely the loss of my mother impacted me in a huge and enormous way.
Oh, I can't imagine what it's like at that age to lose a parent, to lose a loved one, and to become very closely, perhaps intertwined, part of death and what it means and how to unpack that. Because that's something that stays with you. And just recently in the United States, and I know in many parts of the world, on different days throughout the year, they celebrate Mother's Day. We just had Mother's Day,
Yeah,
and I know that's a
yeah.
very big day for so many people. And it brings up a lot, namely folks that have grown up without mothers, those that may no longer have a physical mother here because of passing away and transitioning, and those that may simply have a complicated relationship with their mother and they may no longer be in connection or some type of talk. How did the loss of your mother impact you, particularly when it came to knowing that physically she was gone, but energetically it just evolved differently?
100%, because I sit naturally. I think that's where my intuitive and psychic abilities came in, because I continued to talk to her as if she was already, still sitting next to me, and I continued to have conversations with her, and I can't say that I necessarily felt her energy until much later on. But as a child, it certainly was an outlet, to imagine that she was listening to me and hearing me and walking with me and holding my hand during some very difficult years that followed her death. Um, so it kind of solidified my interaction with the spiritual world as well. So her death was kind of like the introduction, um, by cold immersion, like being thrown into the deep end. Um, but her presence was definitely still with me on so many levels. And when I look back, I can see it more clearly. At the time, I was just grappling to survive the loss of her. It, the way everything went down, she was coming to fetch me from school, so I was left at school alone, grappling with the idea that she might not be coming. And then in that in that situation, it's when I kind of stepped outside of myself and heard this inner voice guiding, my thoughts and going, well, she's not coming, she's not coming, this this other voice. And this other voice became my intuitive voice, that would actually became very reliable in times of need. But that kicked in the minute that I was left there stranded, in this playground. And um, and that, if anything, changed me, um, because I was constantly having dialogue with that other part of myself. And so, definitely, when I was in the playground or I was at school, I didn't feel like I was part of the others, because I felt part here and part not here, if that makes sense.
Yes, you brought up so many slices here that I'd like to perhaps divide and go into a little bit further because it sounds
Sure.
like from what I just heard you say was you opened up to perhaps a spontaneous additional form of communication. In other
Yeah.
words, your psychic abilities and your gifts came through, were born perhaps through this initiation process, which is a huge transition in the loss of someone close to you. And that was
Yeah.
part of your life, an integral figure. And I've heard this, through several narratives and accounts of other people. And it's fascinating how it happens at different points in life, excuse me, for others, but for you, it happened when you were a child.
Yeah.
So you've essentially have been able to embrace, nurture, and grow with these gifts as if they were secondhand. Because you mentioned you didn't feel like you were completely of, you could say, this world, this earth, being
Yeah.
in this reality with other kids your age, and you had another foot in the other side, or on the other side, or with the other
100%.
side.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it was born out of survival, really. I needed to have that connection, because I didn't feel like I could go on without it. So, um, it was that even enhanced that connection, if I could say, because I held on to it so dearly.
Let me ask, what was the impact, perhaps on a more grander or macro level scale in your life? Because I know after the death of a loved one, obviously are ramifications in terms of how we feel, our grief, loss, and processing, a lot of processing,
Mhm.
and figuring out our place in the world and what it means to continue living and lifing without that person being physically present. Because I know the question that I'm asking, it sounds ordinary. It sounds like, well, it's simple. Of course, it had a huge impact, but how did this shift your family dynamics growing up, if any? Did it change the way?
Enormously, enormously. Because it was the start of enormous change in our family. Because what had happened was that she had been coming to fetch me, but she had my two sisters in the car with her, and so it was a head-on collision. And my I'm the eldest, and my middle sister was thrown through the windscreen and almost lost her life on the tarmac. And my youngest sister, she was only 5 months at the time. So she was okay. She was essentially safe. But my parents were very young parents. My father and my mother had me when they were 20 years old. So now you can imagine a 26-year-old father with one child in ICU, in hospital, hanging on to life. And he's lost his wife, and he has a 5 month old, and he has a 6 year old to take care of. So he had to make some very difficult decisions. So ultimately, my 5 month old sister had went to live with other relatives during that tumultuous time. So there was a drastic and radical shift in how our family looked and how our family functioned. And I would say essentially we didn't really function for at least 2 years after that. My father was on autopilot, and I took over the caring of my 3 year old sister when she came home from hospital. So he was at work, and then we would have the domestic there with us in the afternoon, and then I would make sure she took a bath and she had her dinner, and I think she prepared dinner for us. But I was there overseeing what was happening for my younger sister, and I was always there making sure that she got dressed in the morning and that she bathed in the evening and that kind of thing. So when I look now at other 6 year olds, I can't really comprehend a 6 year old taking on that role. But in that time and in that crisis, that's what I did. So it changed my life irrevocably in enormous, enormous ways.
Ooh, that's a lot of responsibility, of at that age when most kids are just entering, many are entering school, the school system, elementary school, for the first time, and it's usually one of learning, beginning, or learning, writing, reading, creative projects, and a lot of fun you think at that age to play. And it sounds like
Yeah.
this spawned something completely different where you stepped into a reality of parenting, taking
Yeah.
on responsibilities, maintaining perhaps the drastic change that occurred and that ensued after your mother died, and then after maybe things subsided, your sister came home, and reality hit. And let me ask, because these are things that sometimes from the outskirts, when we observe, we don't think about how much of a weight it can have and how much of an effect it could have on the development of the child, of you,
For
and
sure.
growing up. What impact did it have on you? Going back to 6-year-old Hayley, and you're growing up and navigating life at that point forward over the next few years, what was it like? Because you stepped into a completely different role. It seems
Yeah, I
like that
did. And
lasted.
look, he remarried pretty soon afterwards, and then we got step siblings. So then it was all of that to deal with, the blended family situation. So she had been present, she had been, part of his life, on the periphery, throughout the crisis. But then they got married 2 years later, and then it was bringing her own children into the mix. I would have to say, psychologists will say that you're often frozen at a point like that. You're frozen at that age when all development, kind of childhood development and childhood curiosity, stops. And I'm just gonna say that I'm very happy to say that it didn't stop my curiosity. That definitely didn't stop. But whereas most children can go forth and innocently navigate the world and have support in doing that, I didn't have that, and my father and my stepmother were ill-equipped to provide that. So from the moment my mom died, it was me navigating the world and interpreting the world on my own. And now you must understand that it's also through a traumatized lens, a traumatized child's lens. So a lot of the perceptions that I formed during those formative years were through that lens. I didn't see the world as a safe place. The world was a very scary, hostile environment where one had to force one's way forward at all costs. And a child of 6 does not have a lot of the survival skills to navigate such landscapes. So a lot of them was adaptive, and just whatever came to me to use is what I implemented. So as a result, I became extremely resourceful, extremely so, and hyper independent. And these are things I've had to unlearn through the years, is that hyper independence, and being able to accept help and to enable myself to allow people in. And because during those years, um, everything felt scary and everything felt like a threat.
I'll just say, with all those changes that happen at such a rapid pace, that's enough for anyone to lose their equilibrium, to lose their balance, sense of self,
Mhm.
sense of safety and security, especially as a child. I can't imagine just as an adult going through all of those changes back to back
Yeah,
and taking on a very different role and trying to process or perhaps putting on hold as kids. We put a hold or put aside those feelings, especially if we don't have people that show us how to process it and to express it and to
yeah.
find healthier ways to cope. But this happened when you were a child. So
I was punished for having those feelings as well. So I was not able to express them, because they were considered unsavory. So yeah, it led to a lot of unhealthy unhealthy coping mechanisms. But I have to say that there's a story that says that if you have one person who cares about you as a child in your formative years, that one person can save you, or that one person can anchor you. And I have to say that having my mother's love and support in those formative 6 years is what I came back to time and time and time and time again, because there was no one to stand in her shoes after she passed. There was nobody who took up the mantle. There was nobody there to guide me. There was nobody there to shield me. There was no one there to protect me. But the formative 6 years that I had with her, I'd have to say were enough. Obviously, it's not enough, but it had to be enough. And I relied on that, and the memory of that, and the memory of being so carefree, and the memory of being loved and cherished so dearly. I held on to that, and then I held on to that, and then my spiritual connection as well deepened, and that was also what provided me with a life jacket, because then I was very immersed in my own spiritual world and communication with God, and deepening my own little relationship with God, because um, I held on to and formed a deeper relationship during those years, and it's what carried me and sustained me. So, when there is lack of positive input from your environment, it can come from other places. And that is what I discovered in those very, very difficult years.
I love that you shared that you were able to tap into, it sounds like, past remembrances, past memories, but also that love, that bond that never dies, even when we leave
Yeah,
this world, which formed that early, perhaps even though it was short, but very strong foundation, which I'll
yeah,
say some people don't even encounter that, even if they have a mother figure or even another parent or caretaker present
yeah,
throughout their life, which may not even match up to that strength of a foundation that it sounds like you had with your mom.
yeah.
What
And
helped you?
I could see the influence of that, because I could see that my sisters didn't get that.
Mm,
And my sisters have passed, so that's why I talk about them in the past tense. My sisters have also passed, but I could see that they didn't get that, and I could see what it did to them, and how uh, it derailed them not having that foundation. I had 6 years. My middle sister only had 3, and my youngest only had 5 months, and I could see how that impacted their lives going forward.
What helped you navigate this process of grief and change, which is just an umbrella term for everything that you have just shared with us, with the changes that happened quickly in your life at this time?
What helped me?
Yes, were there any tools, anything that helped you throughout this process? It doesn't have to be at this age, but as you navigated life, because I would imagine that process of grief with a parent, it's maybe evolving and it's
Oh,
changing and it's adaptive. Was there anything in particular that helped you? Because you mentioned your spirituality as one tool that you
yeah.
looked into to receive that support, perhaps that sense of safety that you didn't always find in this world.
There were it's gonna sound really stupid, but um, I also relied heavily, heavily on my connection to nature.
Mhm.
So I would talk to the moon, and I would cry to the stars, and I would pick out a red leaf and just obsess about the deepness of the red. And okay, I'm a little bit of an artistic person and creative person, but really my connection to nature also was a huge comfort to me, because I would take joy in watching the sunrise, and I would find joy in the smell of an evening fire, in winter. And that is still something that is very important to me, um, and still something that ignites my soul and allows me to feel peace. Music as well, um, and art
Mhm.
and creative pursuit. So while I was so busy surviving, part of my survival mechanisms was creating. So I created art, I created poetry, I sang, and I was very active in my school theater productions. And so creative outlets were very important to me and still are.
Everything you listed, they're so soothing. It sounds like a great way to be able to process your emotions in a very non-traditional way, especially at that time
Yeah.
when art therapy, I remember it wasn't as perhaps mainstream or an option like it is today, or using creative
Mhm.
activities to simply into that frequency of joy. Because I got little child energy. You were able to maintain your
Yeah.
curiosity as a child precisely with the frequency of joy by doing
Absolutely.
things that still allowed you to have fun, to express yourself, and to create, which is why we're here, is to create and
Yeah.
to turn what you've experienced into positive outlets, which is so powerful.
When everything is sad, like it was, and when everything is very grim, um, it's almost like, I want to say this, but this is very controversial, but almost like a world devoid of joy is one that is very hard to contemplate. So you literally seek out
Mm,
any little thing that can just um, bring that joy back, and you suck the marrow out of it because because you don't know when it's going to come again. So yes, I did remain joyful, and I tried to remain joyful because I needed to. Otherwise, the sheer weight and heaviness of the reality of the emotional burden and the emotional shutdown would have gotten the better of me.
that's big what you just said, because when you have different changes in life, any type of change that's very profound, like what you've experienced, and that's plural changes,
Yeah,
it's as if the world has extinguished its light or someone has turned
yeah,
off light and you enter a moment of darkness. And it sounded like from what you just said, I heard you say you were simply looking for the little lights or fires,
Mm,
because when you have light, you have hope, you have faith. There's a
yeah,
redeeming quality with that yin energy
yeah,
rather than darkness. That's why a lot of people generally don't like hanging out in very dark places or in basements or attics. First, you can't see, but
yeah.
second, it's a very different energy to relax into, except maybe for sleeping. So it sounds like that was one of the most powerful themes or threads for you early on as you
Mhm,
as you started navigating life. So Haley, you've gone through a lot of changes. Things are starting to acclimate. Things are starting to maybe go back to a sense of, you could say, regularity or some type of normalcy
mhm,
for you. That's different, obviously. What
yeah.
happens next?
Well, it impacted the family as a whole, obviously, because my middle sister, her health was never good. She had to have a lot of reparative surgery through her childhood. Um, the younger sister stayed with family in a different province, or in America, you would say state, for the first 5 years, and she used to just come for holidays. Um, but during that time, she was staying with um, relatives who were cousins of mine. My aunt and her children became her siblings. Um, and they didn't exactly delineate to her that they were cousins. They let her think that she was their sibling. So it was very disruptive for her now, when she came to live with us when she was 5, because as far as she knew, we were the cousins and we weren't the siblings. So that was a lot of dissonance for her, and very difficult for her, because then the the there was a lot of conflict in the family, and there was even a court case where family members had wanted to gain custody, full time custody over her. So the ramifications were enormous. And then, as far as my step siblings were concerned, they never got over the anger, particularly my stepsister. Never got over the anger that she had at her mother for getting divorced. And now she's got these very needy, very whatever children who are demanding a lot from her mother. So her anger never dissipated towards us. Um, and so it created a lot of tension. And then add to the mix very dysfunctional ways of communication and emotional and mental abuse patterns. And you've got shit in a bucket. So I think it just enhanced my survival skills, but in that, it kept me very much on the outside. I was outside of my family. I was outside of society. I was outside of everything. I couldn't be part of anything because none of it was safe. So it's been an enormous journey of growth on the spiritual level, but only as an adult have I been able to reintegrate the human level, and start to repair all the damage of the arrested self and the abandoned selves that got abandoned along the way in order to survive. But having said that, I met my husband when I was 16, and very much like the owl and the pussycat. So he took me away on his pea green boat or whatever it was in the moonlight, and we have been together ever since. And that has been a journey in on itself. And but I think that was part of my redemptive journey out of there, out of the distress that I was in my teenage years.
You just said a lot. And
Sorry.
to say, oh no, no need to apologize. I want to say first, we're going to back the truck up a little bit and rewind because you mentioned something really
Sure.
huge. Your sister, one of them went to live with relatives and grew up
Yeah,
believing that her cousins were her siblings. And
correct.
she was raised in another household for her first
Yeah,
5 years.
yeah.
And then your dad remarried during this time, obviously
Mhm,
earlier, and you had step siblings come in.
mhm.
How did it impact you? What did it feel like when your family was split apart because you had one sibling go somewhere else, one that was in ICU that eventually came home, and then you were taking on new roles and responsibilities while processing everything? How did that impact you?
I don't think I had time to
Hmm.
really consider it. I was just angry a lot of the time. I lashed out a lot. I I vocalized a lot, but I was punished for that. So even though I was punished for it, I couldn't not. So unfortunately, I was the one who um, became the black sheep because I was the one always pointing out the distress that I was in, and that I think everybody was in. I don't think it was a very happy household, and I know that I'm probably going to be shot down for this, but yeah, it was a very distressing time, and I just I just remember wishing I was somewhere else the entire time.
Can I just
Yeah.
say at first, like a mini YouTube episode commercial that I'm prompting, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story so far and for being very vulnerable in opening those doors and sharing with us, which I'm sure so many people that are watching this can resonate because the
Mm,
dysfunction may have looked differently. There may have been different puzzle pieces, but the main elements
exactly.
that you've described, you've mentioned black sheep, you've mentioned feeling and being like an outsider on the outskirts,
Yeah.
on the periphery many times, a lot of key words. And I feel like so many folks that are on this healing journey, you yourself as a healer and why you're doing what you're doing, I feel like there's common threads here. And the shared, perhaps, journey, even though we're not in that same boat or journey itself, we're on parallels and we're like, hey, see ya, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
I think it gives a level of depth that we don't always see in this perhaps community, in this work that we do, of how you're also human and how what you do now and the level of excellence that you bring to your clients and to the work that you do, a lot of it too was from experience
Mhm.
and healing yourself and saying, whoa, I've been through some things. So I just want
Yeah.
to acknowledge that and affirm that because I think everything that you've shared so far, it's I don't know another word to use, but it's relatable. And I feel like so many people are going to relate to obviously different puzzle pieces, different movements, almost like chess. It's like, okay, some of the events were different. And it speaks
100%.
about how many people feel that sense of perhaps isolation, aloneness, feeling
Mm.
like you're not part of something bigger, whether it's your family system or the world at that time, and you're navigating in a completely different zone.
100%. I mean, there's so much there that's universal, and so much there that, like you say, pieces that I can identify with so many people's different stories. I mean, um, there's the aspects of abuse, there's aspects of um, trauma, there's aspects of childhood grief and navigating grief even as an adult. Um, and separate family dynamics, families being torn apart and fighting each other in court, and there's just so much there that I have to say that I've drawn on in the years that I've been doing this work because there's so many aspects there that, like you say, so many people can relate to.
I appreciate that. I want to ask you too,
Mm,
because we talked for a bulk, which a lot of the changes seem to have occurred when you were in your younger years, around 6, so elementary school age for
yeah,
many folks.
yeah.
from that time, let's say after your father married your stepmother and everything changed within the family household, and even so, when your sister returned at around 5 years of age,
Mhm.
your second sister, from that point on until maybe you met your husband at 16, what was it
Mm.
like growing up? Because you mentioned issues around abuse
Yeah.
and dysfunction, and then later on, your sisters passed away, and that seemed a
Mhm.
little bit later, but growing up, what was that like? How did things continue? Did you feel like you were able to navigate in a better family system? Did things improve?
No, as I say, my father and my stepmother were completely ill-equipped. Um, they were building a business and were very focused on earning money and
Mm,
um, workaholics. And there were different, there were even different economic tiers within the family because my siblings had a very wealthy father. And at the time, my father now is very wealthy, but he was not at the time. And they would have their own personal televisions at that time. I mean, we're talking in the 80s and 90s, like that was unheard of, but they had their own personal televisions and they had the best stereos and the best clothes, and they had holidays overseas, which is very rare for us South Africans. And so they had a completely different lifestyle, even to the one that we had. So there were so many um, challenges to deal with. The monetary aspect never bothered me. In fact, I would hazard to say it went straight over my head. I had so many other things that I was dealing with, but I know that my step brother, he was acutely aware of the differences, and acutely aware that his economic status in our home was very different to the one that he had at his father's house. And I think he felt that he'd been, you know, gone from um what's it, not rags to riches, the other way around, riches to rags, and he was very resentful, I think. um and then on an interpersonal level, oh gosh, things were very tough. My father was extremely confrontational and controlling, which I didn't respond well to. Um and so I fought him a lot, and I just remember um, going through night after night after night of screaming matches, literally till like way past bedtime. Everybody else has gone to bed, and I'm still sitting there screaming at him, and he's still screaming at me, and that was exhausting. So I was navigating the loss of my mother, and then um, going into combat with my father regularly. So I didn't really have a lot of energy for anything else.
it just feels like things just kept shifting.
Yeah.
And you know when you you know when you're in the journey where there's so much has changed and you're like, okay, I'm waiting for things to just settle, to go on a
Uh-huh.
nice peaceful boat ride and just hang out.
I just want to give you a heads up. The story doesn't go that way.
It seems like it reminds me too of some of the tales that you hear that have the redeeming quality, which you've mentioned.
Yeah.
Cinderella. She grew up and then her mother died, right? When
Yeah.
she was younger, a younger child, I believe. And her
Yeah.
father eventually remarries her stepmother, and she
Yeah.
has two stepsisters. And I hear a lot of the similarities because, again, there were mentions of the economic
Mhm.
inequalities. Cinderella was not of the same economic status or wasn't afforded to, even though it had and was connected to her father's,
Yeah.
what was it? Passing trust, what he.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm hearing a lot of that.
My growing up story is very much a Cinderella tale. Um and I mean, so much so that yes, I was home washing the dishes and doing the laundry when they were busy with their friends. So I mean, there's it's a modern day Cinderella tale. And then I guess my husband likes to cast himself as the prince who came and swept me off my feet and saved me from my dismal future. But yeah, we didn't know what we had in store for us. But it's been a lifelong learning and a lifelong challenge. There is no redemptive, redeeming. Okay, and then the fairy godmother waved her magic wand, and everything was okay. It's never been one of those, unfortunately.
I feel like that would be so easy for us as souls and as humans right now to have
Yeah,
that fairy godmother figure just wave the magic over us and say, poof,
yeah,
things are all good. But I feel like that is perhaps a more metaphorical representation of us doing the work. That's the point or the precipice where we're like, okay, a lot of shit happened during my childhood. And I want to kind of circle back there because I heard you say you fought a lot. You had a conflictual relationship with your father. He had a lot
yeah,
of anger. It sounds like a lot of whatever he was dealing with naturally because he also experienced changes, but it
yeah.
seemed like he wasn't emotionally available or ready or able to also help manage and hold space for your emotions. And that must have been tough, especially growing up now with everything that had happened as a young girl and trying to navigate life in general. How did you come to find that emotional nourishment, that emotional support? Did it happen during childhood, or did you eventually have to relearn that, relearn how to tap into that?
Yeah, I've had to relearn it, and it's been a long process. And I wouldn't say I'm done with it because um, I was very lucky in finding my husband early. So for me, and you'll read about people who've been through hugely traumatic events in childhood, they will kind of latch on to any kind of emotional security that will be the most important thing for them in a relationship. And I'd have to say, for me, that is definitely what he's provided, is emotional security. And I've kind of been able to grow from that and use that as a base in my own growth and healing. So I was lucky to find that early, because I don't think I would have survived quite as well if I hadn't. But finding nourishment and giving myself nourishment and learning to receive and learning to trust others has been part of that adult journey. And um, we went on to have the special needs children, which then came with a whole bunch of other problems and a whole bunch of new challenges that I hadn't encountered. Um, but all of these challenges have forced one, well, in particular me, in my own journey, to keep checking, keep learning, keep shifting, keep changing my perceptions about myself and about the world and about my beliefs. And are my beliefs healthy? Are my beliefs rooted in past trauma, or are they serving me, or can they be shifted to serve me better? Or is my communication style very aggressive, which it was growing up in that household? Can I adapt my communication style to better serve me and those around me? Can I adapt the way that I am in relationship to better serve me and those I'm in relationship with? So it's really just been, I suppose, when people look at my life story and they look at all the challenges that I've faced, because you'll come to hear it's not just my childhood trauma. There has been massive challenges in my adult life as well. Um, it really has just been the catalyst for my own personal growth and healing. And then what that has done for me is that it provides me a base in the work that I do. It provides me a base because I have a large library of reference in my own personal journey that I can go back to. So there hasn't been a story yet that I haven't been able to identify with on some level, on some little nugget there that I get you. I understand that because the stories may be very different and the circumstances may be very different, but the themes, like I said, very universal themes. The struggle of self-actualization and struggle of self-healing and self-integration is is one that is universal.
So, Haley, from what you just said, it sounds like your husband, literally like a prince, coming into your life and showing you love, safety, being able to receive and get support is possible. And you end up getting married, you have children, and it seems like these circumstances and perhaps the eventful or uneventful, it depends on how it went, the way that you met and then how you had children, those situations precipitated the start of your healing because you asked a lot of, and you broached, I should say, a lot of questions about healing. Where you at? What things needed to change? Limiting beliefs, the way you communicated. So
Well,
after,
I have to say, there is this concept out there that you meet your, what do they say, your twin flame,
mm,
and
go ahead,
and what is it? Your twin flame, and what's the other one? Your soul something,
soulmate, twin
soulmate.
flame.
So,
Um,
so my take on that is, we met, and it was very much like, oh, you, oh, yes, we're gonna do this. It was instant, and it definitely felt karmic. But I have a lot to say about that because people think that those kind of connections are just so wonderful and so storybook and so good. And let me tell you something, they are not. So
preach.
yes, it was the start of a lot of healing, but like I may have mentioned to you, healing is given to you as an opportunity for healing. So it could have gone many other ways. It could have, um, um, yeah. There were lots of challenges in that relationship that forced us both as people to look at how we relate to others and how we relate to the world. And so the relationship itself was very healing, but it's because it was so challenging for both of us, and that we had to learn about ourselves and we had to learn about our own childhood dysfunction and heal that for ourselves so that we could have the kind of relationship that supported one another instead of tore one another down. And then we were faced with having a special needs child. My son has autism, my eldest, and in most special needs families, the divorce rate is something like, I don't know, 90%. And because it's very confrontational having a special needs child, you are forced not only to confront your own dysfunction and your own unhealed wounds, but you're forced to confront how you see yourself in the world,
Mm,
how you see the world serving you or not serving you. You're forced to confront so many things of a bigger nature. And many times, most people are barely even managing a relationship dynamic. And now you're throwing that on top of that. Plus, you're having to support this human being who requires extra support from you than you feel that you have to give. And so I often say that the birth of my son was the catalyst for a lot of that healing. Yes, it was meeting my husband, but then also having our first child. And I often felt like he had a brochure of, from heaven of what these parents were going to do for him
mm,
and what these parents were going to look like and how they were going to support him and how many skills that they would have and how they were just going to be there to support this journey. And I feel like he got down here and he looked at the two of us and thought, really, like, this is what you give me, like this. Like, I've been cheated. I want to go back. And I felt that very early on, and I felt like every day I was failing some kind of exam, and I felt like every day I was failing my child, and I I just couldn't do that anymore. I didn't want to just feel like I was failing all the time. So I really, really had to look at how I could better support myself and better support my husband and better support my child. And that meant really deep diving and rooting out the trauma that was preventing me from perhaps relating in a healthy way or being able to fully give of myself or whatever it was. And so I feel like all challenges that we're given offer us these opportunities. Um, Sometimes it's not so clear. Sometimes it really just feels insurmountable. And certainly when my mom died and I was 6, it felt insurmountable. But um, eventually you learn that with each challenge and with each setback, it's just another opportunity to go deeper into learning about yourself and the universe and how you fit into this grand scheme of things.
Haley, if we could do an intro video or trailer to how to heal, I feel like what you just said would be the perfect trailer because you summed up so many points, so many profound and vital points of that moment in our life when we realize perhaps there's a level of awareness, consciousness, and even an acknowledgement, and finally an acceptance where we say, yes, it's time. But it's different when you consciously say, I would like to start healing. And then you have other situations, events, relationships, people that trigger that,
Mm,
that help move that along. And you named it relationships, namely with a spouse, but it could be
mm,
with other types of relationships too, and children.
mm.
I'm like, if you want to clean yourself out, have a child
Yeah.
because they bring up so much and they mirror to you so many things, healed, maybe unhealed, that you have
Mhm.
seen in yourself. And you brought up so many of these elements and how you've navigated it. And I think this is a point of relation for so many people, especially parents. And that's a whole nother topic of parenting, navigating children, children that may have special needs, children where maybe you didn't plan to have children, or maybe the parenting style is different, or you're a single parent, whatever it is. I feel like children are almost like little, when storks and cartoons drop off kids in
Yeah.
house? I see that energy coming and the children's like, "Okay, we're coming." And the surprise, it's very romanticized, and it's a beautiful blessing. Babies are coming, and in whichever way you receive the child,
Yeah.
then you start the journey, and I'll say the parenting journey really reflects so much of everything you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And at this point, because you're married, you have your children, you realize the statistics of married couples with special needs children, and you're navigating new sets of challenges and also realizing there's a lot that you're healing and that things are being provoked at this time. When
Mhm.
was it that you decided during this journey, I'm ready to start helping others?
Well, um, I think I've always been a natural teacher. So even though I wasn't helping others in this way specifically, I've always shared whatever knowledge I have to share. So even if I remember once I I I had many careers before this one, and I had a personal assistant, and she was possibly special needs. This was before I had my son, and she said that she had learning disabilities, and I didn't know what that meant. And I might have been rather brisk and impatient and a little bit aggressive, like I had been prone to since growing up in the household I did. And so I could have been a little bit harsh and brash with her. And, but I always tried to give her skills, and I always tried to do my best for her in giving her knowledge and giving her skills that she would need, and upskilling her in her job and teaching her what I knew and sharing that knowledge. And so, even in my failing in dealing with people, even if I was harsh back then, um, she stayed friends with me on Facebook, and I messaged her once, and I said, I realized that I was quite harsh back then, and I'm sorry if I was ever harsh with you. And she said, yeah, it was hard. It was hard. She said, but you were one of the greatest teachers I ever had. So she said, I learned everything I knew about this, that, and the next thing from you. So I think it was never a decision that I was going to help people. I've always just felt like if I have a piece of knowledge or I have a skill, then I will pass it on if I can. And so no matter what job or position that I've been in, that's kind of always just been how I am.
Sounds like you just naturally kind of like when you're on the couch and you fall, you fall into the couch, but that's it sounds like you've just fallen into place throughout your life in roles that have helped guided and supported people,
Mm.
and naturally those skills are transferable, so you can change what it is that you're doing, right? The job
Mm.
itself, description could change, but those skills are ever present,
Yeah,
and
I think
you brought
so.
that over. Go ahead, you wanted to say something?
No, 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 sorry. I was just agreeing with you. I said, I think so. I think you just transfer whatever skills you have.
That's I think that's amazing, and I know in this short time, which to me feels like 5 minutes and it's almost been an hour, where we've only just skirted, I feel, some of what you've gone through in your evolution, but I feel like we've been able to learn so much about the behind the scenes of a healer, of someone who's done the work, of what that's looked like, the different circumstances and experiences that I was gonna say waited for you. Because when you incarnate, personally feel like there are certain situations and challenges that our soul has signed up for. Kind of
Uh,
like when you make a plan, it's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do.
roadmap.
Yes, but we're not always conscious of it for good reason because it's almost like having a cheat manual. If we see that, we're like, well, we'll
Yeah,
just solve it because we know what to do.
yeah.
But you've shown so much of, I think, the difficulties in life that we go through, and to unveil that and to say, I think this is commonplace with so many people. It's just for many reasons beyond the scope of this video. People don't talk about it because there's a lot of that comes up. There's a lot to process.
Hmm.
And you've been able to do that and to transfer it in healthy ways through creation naturally. You've mentioned various times that you're very creative, and the previous jobs that you've had were able to exhibit those qualities and you were able to share them with others. And so I want to ask as we wrap this up, I have two questions. Given your entire journey up to this point in your life, right now, today, what are three things that you have learned about yourself that you didn't maybe realize early on in life, or maybe that healing has helped you connect closer to who you are? What are three things that you've learned about you, about Hayley?
Well, I think since after the death of my mother, I mean, it certainly felt like love was hard to come by, and it was very hard for me to get in touch with. So one of the things that I've learned is to fall back in love with myself and to appreciate myself because that was lacking for most of my life. Um, the other thing is that joy can be found anywhere. You just have to look for it. Um, and I don't really know a third one. I guess even at your lowest, you always have something to share.
Golden nuggets. I feel like there's perhaps future parts coming, more sequels to this story as we unravel. I am just so grateful for having you on here and for creating the space for this opportunity to take a look and to open that closet again. This is your personal closet. Opening, I like to say life suitcase. We're opening up your own stories and unpacking and taking all these items. And I think it was very vulnerable, very connecting, a lot of relation in my head while you're going through so many themes. I mean, again, the events could be different. I feel like so many folks are gonna be like, yes, yes. And finally realizing as you're going through life that in spite of the hardships that you've experienced and the loss and trauma, abuse, and you could say just massive changes on all levels, there are beautiful ways that you can harness this pain, obviously without bypassing it as you process it, but
Yeah,
you can harness it and you've demonstrated it by tapping into what you're here to do, to share and be of service to others, to
yeah,
support and guide others. So I know this came more from a healer perspective, right? But I think this is applicable for anyone. It doesn't really matter regardless of the title. But for others that are stepping into the role of, you could say healer, people that are going to hold space for others in that capacity, because I know there's
or
many
even
different.
if you're just going through the roughest time of your life, really, just to know that there's always something.
Yes, but I wanted to specifically leave off with this question, particularly for those that are stepping into similar roles. Maybe there's others that are training to
Mm,
be family constellations
sure.
facilitators, or they want to be therapists, whatever it is. If you are wanting or pursuing currently to be in a position to help guide others, what would be advice, guidance that you could offer? Because so many people think, I can't do this because I'm not healed enough.
Oh, okay. Well, definitely. I mean, your healing journey is what you offer. Your healing journey is your offering, is the thing that you can share the most about because it's the one that you've experienced yourself. So don't be afraid to offer what you have because there will be value in that for someone who's further on down the road. There's going to be value in whatever you have to share about where you're at, um, because somebody else who hasn't even um, gotten there yet and doesn't even know how to heal or where to even begin, you sharing your little nugget of information could just be the key that they need to set them off on their journey. So I think embrace your healing journey, embrace everything that it is, because that will become your greatest gift to share.
We're going to leave off here. I feel like that perfectly wrapped up a beautiful way to end this, but also to offer some support to others. Haley, I just want to thank you so much for sharing sharing your truth, sharing your story. I am just very grateful to be in this space with you. And I also want to say before I forget, if you would like to connect with Haley, if you're interested in working with her, or you simply want to learn more about her, I will leave the playlist here, but also all her contact details are in the description box below and in the comment area. So I highly encourage you to take a look at the previous videos. You're going to learn even more. It's really cool. Some of the stuff Haley does with family constellations, and even more so in her personal journey. Thank you so much, Haley, for being here again. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.